longer than when I arrived. But I don't know what I want to say, because I prepared this whole thing on policy and.
Well, go for it.
No,
Do your
no.
thing. Do your
I mean, what am I
thing.
going to do? Sit here and read? I'd rather have meaningful discussion amongst people than sit here and read off
Well,
my
you could
little paper.
facilitate that.
Yeah, what about policy?
It's so left field from where we're at right now. I don't want to derail the discussion.
You are the discussion.
I am the
It's your
discussion.
moment, you have
It's
your.
my moment.
Well, let me ask you, Karen, are there
Yeah, Dan.
like 2 or 3 policy issues? I mean, the thrust here is to personalize.
Yeah.
And then make sense of this place that we're at. Are there 2 or 3 policy things that are heavy on your heart and mind right now?
Well, I guess, you know, you all read the announcement that Moroni had sent out about the discussion tonight, and how these mechanisms become institutionalized through policy. One of the things that I was thinking about, this pathologization of cultural values and communication styles. There's a couple of ways I could take this. Let's say, for example, risk assessment, right, within the context of an environmental impact assessment. How do you quantify cultural harm? How do you account for not only different worldviews, but completely different perceptions of reality, right? When you're relying on white heteronormative measurements of what is valid data, what is quantifiable, what falls outside the realm of being quantifiable, and I don't know where I'm taking this down. I'm gonna go back to my questions.
Well, that's actually a great thing to bring up that I think ties in. I mean,
Sure does.
add to that the sentence, how do you quantify completely other worldviews in terms of what constitutes a success?
Absolutely.
So think about Sean's visit this last spring and his ideas about connectivity and relationality.
Right.
Of making that the center in indigenous education and epistemologies of measurements of success. So those are ideas that are nearly impossible to find root for at an institution like this. I'm chairing a colleague's promotion committee right now, and you know, it's funny, it's writing up the report for her promotion, and I wanted to talk about some issues like that. How her work has led to a growth of significant relationships out in the world, within the university, and found there's no space for it. And if I were to do that, I would have heard her somewhere up the road. It wasn't the place to tilt at windmills when a colleague's promotion to professorship was at stake. But I think that does tie back into.
But in the same effect, if you can see that, I mean, I may be coming out of context, but say her professorship and her line of work may be going somewhere that you, by stepping up, would have prevented from doing something that actually institutionalized something that just perpetuated the ideas behind the exclusion, or you know, whatever. I mean, you know, can you see the context? What? Not like that. No, I'm saying is, say this Professor X is going down the road with a design to make a policy, something that will become a policy, or an attitude, or a social construct that's actually going to just concrete something you're going to have to, and it won't no longer be a windmill. It'll like be beating your head on a pillar. You know, it'll become a pillar. You know.
I see what you're saying. That's not the case.
What I'm saying is, but
I see what you're saying.
Where is the point where people, like I said, she referred to isms, and we had that discussion when I first got here. It's just all about, I mean, the latest ism is capitalism. And it is, you know, I mean, we're all stuck on our job, with our job. We all have to pay to eat. We all have to do, you know, and it's all about grants and finances and, you know, and credibility and all this. And it's when is it the point that if people are going to step up and say something against that just basic flow to ignorance. I mean, you know, that maybe I'm generalizing, but you know what I'm saying. You know, that you're told where to go and you do what you're told, and it perpetuates what's already in its form.
Well, in that regard, it's interesting that, again, Mesoamerican diaspora people displaced by NAFTA and neoliberal reforms in Mexico are at the heart of urban agriculture because they want to decommodify their relationship to food, right? And so there's that to consider as that sort of example of marginality at the center as an inventive force of social transformation, institutional transformation. But let's go back to your point about risk assessment, because I mean, when we say we can't quantify cultural harm, there are those of us, including myself, and I'm going to the White House to advise them on this. You can quantify. Now, should you? Is another question. Now, right now, you have to. Whether you should or not is an ethical question.
Right.
Strategically, you have to, right? But we have to be careful. And it's not a bad idea inherently that we're going to quantify something like cultural harm. I mean, if you can quantify, like in the way you're suggesting, the microaggressions lead to health effects. That can be quantified and should be quantified because we can use it as a weapon in these discursive battles. So I think we need to figure out, how do you quantify the loss of a sense of place? That's a cultural harm that may be associated with can be correlated statistically to poor health outcomes.
Well, and I almost think that a more useful way of dealing with it, rather than using quantification perhaps, is measurability, which is, a completely different concept.
Well, you can measure things, I mean,
what's the difference?
What's the difference without having to translate it into like a numerical,
Measurement and quantification, how are they different?
How are they different? Because you don't necessarily have to apply a numerical value when you're measuring
you can
something.
take stock of someone's mental.
Well,
For example, is kind of a measurement of character.
Anyway, all right, wait. It's not goddamn floor.
Okay, I got a question.
No, wait.
Can't you get away from quantitative and go to qualitative?
10 minutes left.
Shut up.
I think we should give Moroni and I the floor to close it up. I mean,
Let me have
Finish your
one more minute.
I would like to hear Karen.
Thank you, Moroni. The whole reason that I agreed to be involved in this discussion is because I wanted Moroni and others to know that this is not an isolated incident within the Evans School.
And you're not alone.
Not alone at all. While perhaps the Trail of Tears didn't get thrown in on my stuff, Devin and I and various other people within our department experience very similar issues on a daily basis.
Rather horrific, actually.
Really horrific.
Well, wasn't there some kind of mailing list thing going around that was kind of derogatory that I heard? See, I mean, I'm not in the middle of this circle and emails that fly around here. But there was something that made it to the media about some email list server thing that brought up something really derogatory against the indigenous community and the native, the ethnic studies and kind of thing.
Well, I think that was the initial incident
Is that what it was?
that
Okay.
happened last year. And were y'all aware of this incident when it happened? Were you guys here? No? What is your thought about, I mean, you read that whole exchange. What are your thoughts about what happened there? And what is it about the culture of the Evans School that encouraged this kind of behavior?
I actually would like some clarification because I don't know you made reference to it in the beginning, but I don't really know what this is, what
I
happened.
don't know either. Should I bring up the email?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Evidence.
I should bring up the emails
That's really
that I
important.
got.
Always keep evidence.
What did you call it? Bureaucratic technologies.
No,
I don't think I
I
have
wish
the
I could bring up the emails
You
I
have
got.
it?
Hate emails from faculty.
Where's that?
Haiti?
That website
Hate
with
email from faculty colleagues in my department. I mean, that's what led to the mediation. But the mediation was a whitewash, right? It was done by an honorary white person, a black guy, who totally said that
There was
my
a song
complaints
about
and
it, right?
Karen's and
Yeah.
someone else were outliers.
Slug. What do you got going on there?
The very process that
That's your
I mean,
requirement.
the discriminatory act so freaked out the university, they brought a mediator in so that I wouldn't sue.
Okay, yeah, that's what I, something like
Do you
I saw
guys
going
know
on.
what the Trail of Tears is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's important for people to understand that we're
Yeah.
talking about a Holocaust event,
Absolutely.
you know?
Right, so
Absolutely.
this was
So
a
it's.
slog that was made out of this email that was sent, and it was sent last year.
Firewater Friday.
Right.
The Indians
Indian
taking
guy.
that.
Yeah, so, and this is the one that I felt didn't receive sufficient attention, which is why I wanted this discussion to happen. And I'm really grateful for Bonnie and Devin and Karen to come and really talk about this. Not only this was the impetus for this discussion, but it has broader implications. Broader implications about, I mean, it goes all the way up to this macro structure that Devin was talking about, of how incidents like this inform the macro structure, how they inform these larger decision-making structures, and how indigenous people or other, I don't know what to say now, minorities. Others, when they're in these,
Other others.
when they're approaching these decision-making structures that actually have some power over their communities, how do they engage in them? How do they become a part of them? How do they participate in them? And as I've been studying, as I've been looking, as I've been working with the Navajo Nation, there's this continual marginalization between this relationship between the federal government, whether they're federal government or state government, or even municipal governments, and tribal communities. And this continually happens, and so I study co-optation. And the idea of co-optation is a little different than the classical definition, but the idea of co-optation that I have is that it's a process of coercion and manipulation, of where the power holder asserts and tries to maintain their power over the relatively powerless. And by doing that, they do this in numerous ways, and one of those ways is by sharing in the responsibility of power, but not in the substance of power. And that brings in a lot of issues, and that's one mechanism.
Consultation.
Right, and that's consultation. That's one mechanism of this continued marginalization. But as Devin was pointing out, marginalization can then become an inventive process. And I really like that. That while you're looking at what these groups are marginalized.
Are you referring to co-optation within the Native community?
Well, this is co-optation within there could be co-optation within the Native community as well, and it can happen everywhere. But I'm talking specifically about.
Oh, the school here?
Well, I mean, it could be
No,
the school here, but I'm talking specifically just in general about co-optation, what co-optation is between the
Okay.
power holder and the relatively powerless.
Yeah.
But that's the larger discussion that came to my mind. But it started off with this, and what is happening within, and how does this happen within the Evans School, which is so focused on understanding policy and how you develop policy, and are so focused on these participative mechanisms of policy, yet something like this can still occur. And that was a question that I, in my mind, had, and how do things like this continually marginalize people like myself, where now, when instances like this happen, I am super sensitive to these things. I'm super sensitive that the students and the faculty in the school may see me as a troublemaker because I sent.
Oh,
You are
certainly
the
will.
Native
You're already-
American in the
because
Evans School.
I-
You are
I
already
wrote
a
this.
troublemaker.
Right,
Sorry.
I wrote this and started the whole incident. And so, anyway, so the larger question is, when an indigenous group approaches maybe the federal government and they say, look, uranium is bad for our people, they receive the same response. They have consultation, and it's done. And yet, these tribes who are close to uranium, their people continue to die.
And consultation
Same thing in
doesn't
South
mean-
Dakota too.
Right.
So do
Consultation.
you think the appropriate response to something like this would be like zero tolerance, or what? I mean,
Yeah,
what
so-
is the correct response?
So I don't know, that's why I invited you.
What do you guys think?
Right.
I got a question. I mean,
Wait.
who puts policy in place? I mean, who actually decides the policy is gonna be in place?
So, yeah, what do you
Yeah,
think?
what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I came to the Evans School after this happened, but heard about it, but just in my experience in the Evans School and the kind of discussions we've had that have related to race, there's this there's a lot of, I guess where it would fall in this chart is in the color blindness category. Where
Yeah, we're a post-racial society. too.
Well, I mean, so like everybody in the Evans School like wants to believe they're like super progressive.
Everybody in Seattle wants to believe that.
And that's
too.
great. And, I mean, because they're there because they want to make policy that's going to like shape the world and like make it a better place. And so then they end up coming at it from this like, from the colorblind like, I think like this incident doesn't really like race isn't